Beneath the twin suns of Zalos, the sky burned violet and gold. But the air in the royal chamber hung cold and still. The queen of the Zinthari sat upon her obsidian throne, her silver eyes unblinking, her long fingers curled around the arms of her seat. She had seen countless wars, seen empires rise and fall, but never had she felt such dread as when the human ship descended through the clouds like a falling star trailing fire in silence. The humans had come, not with fleets, not with weapons, blazing, but with one vessel small and scarred. Its hull pitted from battles fought in distant stars. They sent only one emissary, a soldier clad in black armor that shimmered like oil on water. He walked alone across the crystal plains toward the palace, his steps slow but steady, his presence heavy like a storm yet to break. The queen had ordered her guards to let him pass. She wanted to see this creature who dared approach the heart of the Zinthari Empire without fear, without demand, without even a translator. The soldier stopped 10 paces from her throne, and for a long moment neither moved. Then with deliberate care he reached up and unsealed his helmet. What spilled out was not the face of a monster, not the snarling beast. The Zinthari had been taught to expect in their ancient war songs but the face of a young woman. Soft features, tired eyes and hair, the color of burnt wheat tied back in a simple knot. Her skin was pale, marked with old scars and fresh bruises, but her gaze held no malice, only sorrow. The queen felt something crack inside her chest, a soundless fracture she had not known she could feel. The soldier's name was Lisa, and she had not come to fight. She came because her people were dying. For months, the human colonies along the rim had been vanishing, whole worlds going dark. No signals, no survivors, only silence and the faint echo of something ancient stirring in the void. The humans had traced the pattern back to the Zinthari border and found ruins older than both their species, ruins that hummed with a power neither could control. Isa had volunteered for the mission, not because she was brave, but because she had nothing left to lose: her brother, her best friend, her home, all gone, swallowed by the same darkness now creeping toward Zalos. She had studied the Zinthari for years, learned their language through stolen broadcasts and broken archives. She knew their history, their pride, their pain. They too had lost much in the last great war, a war they blamed on humanity, though Lisa now knew the truth. It was neither human nor Zinthari who had started it. It was something else, something watching from the edges of space, waiting. When Lisa spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. She did not bow. She did not beg. She simply said, "We are not your enemy." The queen did not answer. At first her mind raced through centuries of hatred, through the songs of vengeance sung by her mothers and grandmothers. She remembered the stories of human ships burning Zinthari, nurseries of children lost in the void, of mothers screaming into dead comms. But then she looked again at Lisa's face, at the exhaustion in her eyes, the tremor in her hands, not from fear but from carrying grief too heavy for one soul. "Why should I believe you?" the queen finally asked, her voice like wind through stone. "Because I have nothing to gain by lying," Lisa replied, "and everything to lose if you do not listen." She stepped closer, ignoring the hiss of the royal guards, and pulled a small device from her belt. It projected a hologram above the floor. Images of dead worlds, twisted metal forests of frozen bodies. Cities turned to glass, not by bombs, but by something that drained life itself. "This is what comes," she said. "This is what follows." Silence. The queen stared at the images, her silver eyes wide for the first time in centuries. She felt small. "We thought you attacked us," she whispered. "We thought you attacked us," Lisa said softly. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the palace and the distant cry of Zalosian windbirds outside. Then the queen rose from her throne. Slowly she walked down the steps until she stood before Lisa face to face. They were nearly the same height. The queen's skin shimmered with faint bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with her emotions. Now they glowed a soft blue. "The color of trust. Tell me everything," Lisa said. And so she did. She spoke of the signal found in the ruins, a frequency that matched no known language but carried a pattern, a warning buried beneath layers of static. She spoke of how both human and Zinthari tech reacted to it, how their ship's systems glitched when near it, how their dreams filled with whispers in a voice that was not their own. The queen listened, her expression shifting from suspicion to horror to something like recognition. "We have heard that voice," she said softly, "in the deep temples beneath the palace. It wakes us in the night. It calls us home. Lisa asked. The Queen looked away, toward the great window where the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood and ash, the place before the stars. She said the place where all things began and will end. They both knew then what had to be done. The enemy was not each other. The enemy was the silence between stars, the thing that fed on division, on fear, on war. And it was coming. Over the next few days, Lisa and the Queen worked together. They shared data. They compared star charts. They found more ruins scattered across the galaxy, each one a beacon, each one a trap. The pattern was clear. The entity was hurting them, driving them apart so it could pick them off one by one. But now they were united. The Queen ordered her fleet to stand down. She opened her archives to Lisa. She even allowed human scientists to land on Zalos, something no outsider had done in 500 years. And Lisa in turn sent a message back to Earth. Not of war, but of alliance. It was fragile. This peace built on shared terror and fragile hope. But it was real. On the 7th day, Lisa stood again in the royal chamber, this time without her armor. She wore simple human fatigues, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger without the weight of the suit. The Queen watched her from the throne. But this time she did not sit like a ruler, she sat like a woman. You could stay, the Queen said quietly. Lisa shook her head. I have to go back, I have to warn the others. The Queen nodded, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Why are you crying? Lisa asked gently. Because you came alone, the Queen whispered, because you came unarmed, because you trusted us when we gave you no reason to, and because you are going back to face death. So the rest of us might live. Lisa stepped forward and took the Queen's hand in hers. It was cool and smooth like river stone. Maybe we all get a second chance, she said. The Queen squeezed her hand, then released it. Go, she said. But know this. If you fall, we will not let your sacrifice be forgotten. Lisa smiled faintly, then turned and walked out of the chamber, her boots clicking softly against the crystal floor. The Queen watched her go, and for the first time in her long life she wept. Not for loss, but for hope. Lisa returned to her ship, not with triumph, but with quiet resolve. The Zinthari had given her more than data. They had given her trust, and that was heavier than any weapon she had ever carried. As her vessel lifted from the crystal plains of Zalos, the twin suns glinted off its hull like farewell tears below. The Queen stood alone on the palace balcony, her silver eyes fixed on the sky until the ship vanished into the stars. Back on the bridge, Lisa activated the secure comms channel. Her fingers moved fast over the console. She had spent days compiling evidence recordings of the ruins' energy readings from Zinthari sensors, even fragments of the strange signal that haunted both species. She attached them all to a single message addressed to the United Earth Command with the subject line, "Not War Alliance." Hours passed in silence as the ship cruised through neutral space. Then a reply crackled through the speakers. It was from Admiral Carter, a woman Lisa had once served under her voice, sharp with disbelief. You expect us to believe the Zinthari are suddenly our friends after everything they've done? Lisa took a breath. I expect you to look at the data. Mom, the dead worlds, the signal, the ruins, they're real and they're coming for us. A pause, then a sigh. Fine, send everything well, review it, but don't expect open arms. That was enough for now. Meanwhile on Xalos, the Queen faced her own storm. The High Council gathered in the Chamber of Echoes, their faces hard with suspicion. You let a human walk among us unchained, one elder hissed. You shared our secrets. I shared our survival. The Queen replied, her voice calm but firm. The humans did not burn our nurseries. It was something else. Something older and hungrier, and if we keep fighting each other, it will eat us both. Another counselor stepped forward, his bioluminescence flickering red with anger. And what proof do we have besides the word of one tired soldier? The Queen activated the central hollow. The same images Lisa had shown her filled the room. Dead forests, glass cities. The signal waveform pulsing like a heartbeat gone wrong. The council fell silent. The truth was too large to deny. We prepare the fleet. She said, not for war against humans, but for war against the silence in the weeks that followed. Both sides moved with new purpose. Human engineers worked alongside Zinthari techs aboard joint science stations, orbiting dead worlds. They discovered the ruins were not buildings. but anchors, each one tied to a point in space where reality grew thin like worn fabric. And through those thin places something watched Lisa, led a small team to the outer rim to investigate the largest ruin, yet found it floated in the void like a black tooth jutting from nothing, its surface covered in symbols that shifted when stared at. Too long, two of her crew went mad within hours, babbling about voices singing in their bones. Lisa herself heard them faint whispers in the static between heartbeats, but she held on by thinking of the Queen's face, by remembering that someone believed in her. She found something deep inside the ruin, a chamber where time bent strangely. The walls showed scenes not of the past, but of possible futures. In one, humans and Zenthari fought side by side. In another, they turned on each other and were devoured. In a third, the stars themselves went dark one by one. But in every vision, there was one constant, a single human and a single Zenthari, standing together at the edge of the habits. When she returned, she brought back a shard of the ruin. It hummed with cold energy, and when placed near Zenthari tech, it glowed with the same blue light as the Queen's skin. During moments of trust back on Earth, the United Command finally agreed to meet the Zenthari, not on a battlefield but on a neutral station orbiting Mars. Lisa stood with the Queen as they faced the human leaders. The Queen wore no crown, only a simple robe, her silver eyes meeting each human gaze without flinching. "We do not ask for forgiveness," the Queen said. "We ask for time to stand together." To the surprise of many, the humans agreed. A joint task force was formed, codenamed Dawn Chorus. Its mission to find every ruin, to understand the signal, and to close the thin places before the silence broke through. Lisa was named Human Liaison. Her rank elevated not for glory but for necessity. She spent her days shuttling between species, translating not just words but fears, hopes, misunderstandings. She learned to read the subtle shifts in Zenthari skin tones, just as the Queen learned to read human micro-expressions, the small twitches of mouth or brow that spoke louder than words. One evening aboard the station, Lisa found the Queen watching Earth through a viewport. The blue-green marble hung in the black like a promise. "It is beautiful," the Queen said softly. "It is broken," Lisa replied, "but worth saving." The Queen turned to her. "You carry so much for one." So young Lisa smiled faintly. "My brother used to say, the universe gives the heaviest loads to those who can bend but not break." "Do you feel broken?" Not yet. They stood in silence for a long time. Two women from different worlds, bound by something neither had asked for, but both had chosen. Then the alarms. Blarita new signal had been detected, stronger than any before. It came from the galactic core, and it was growing. The silence was no longer waiting. It was calling. On the bridge of the lead human cruiser, Lisa watched the data stream in. The signal was not just sound, it was a pull. A gravity of the mind drawing ships, thoughts, even dreams toward it already. 3 scout vessels had vanished near the core. Their last transmission, a single word, home, spoken in 1,000 voices at once. The Queen appeared. Beside her, her skin pulsing with urgent red and gold patterns. "We must go there. It's a trap," Lisa said. "Maybe," the Queen replied, "but it is also the source. If we do not face it now, it will come to us and we will be unready." Lisa knew she was right. The time for hiding was over. She turned to the comms officer. "Send the order, all ships prepare for jump to galactic core, full combat readiness. But tell them this is not a battle of weapons. It is a battle of wills." As the fleet assembled, a strange calm settled over Lisa. She thought of her brother, of the Queen, of the fragile thread of trust they had woven between their peoples. She put on her armor again, not as a soldier, but as a shield for those who could not fight. The Queen watched her seal the helmet, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "This time I come with you." The Queen said. Lisa nodded. They would face the silence together, and as the engines roared to life and the stars stretched into lines of light, the two women stood side by side, ready to meet whatever waited in the dark, not as enemies, but as the first true allies the galaxy had ever known. Months passed since the rift closed and peace settled over the galaxy like morning mist. But Lisa felt it. The quiet hum beneath the calm. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm. Not because the danger is gone, but because everyone is holding their breath on. The anchor station routines formed. Humans and Xanthari shared meals, learned each other's songs, and even began to laugh together. But Lisa noticed something others missed. The signal was gone, yet the ruins remained. And they were. Changing one night while reviewing sensor logs, she saw a faint pulse deep in a dead system near the outer arm. Not the old signal, but something new. Slower. Gentler. Like a heartbeat waking from sleep. She called the Queen immediately. They met in the observation dome, the stars stretched above them. Endless and cold. You think it is returning? The Queen asked. Not returning. Lisa said, I think it is healing. The Queen tilted her head, her bioluminescent skin glowing a soft green, the color of curiosity. The entity was never evil. Lisa explained it was broken, lonely. It reached out the only way it knew how, by pulling others into its pain. But we showed it another way. Now it is learning. The Queen was silent for a long time. Then she placed a hand on Lisa's shoulder. Then we must not fear it, we must listen. They sent a small science vessel to the source, not armed. Not wary, but open. The crew included both humans and Xanthari, led by a young Xanthari researcher named Kale and a human engineer named Dana. They carried no weapons, only recording gear, and a single shard from the original ruin. When they arrived, they found not a rift but a bloom from the center of the dead system. A new structure rose, not black and sharp, but smooth and silver like a flower. Made of light, it pulsed gently, sending out waves of calm. Not fear. Kale reached out with a sensor probe. The moment it touched the surface, images flooded their screens, not of war or loss, but of creation. Stars being born, oceans forming on young worlds, life stirring in the dark. It is remembering itself. Dana whispered back on the anchor station. Lisa and the Queen watched, the feed tears in both their eyes. This changes everything, Lisa said. It already has, the Queen replied. Word spread fast across both empires. Some feared the new bloom. Others called it a trick, but the Queen spoke before the High Council and Lisa before the United Earth Assembly. They did not demand belief. They simply shared what they had seen. Slowly, trust grew. Ships began visiting the bloom, not to study it as a threat, but as a teacher. It responded to presence, to intention. When a ship approached with fear, the light dimmed. When one came with openness, it brightened and shared more visions. A human child who had lost her parents in the early attacks was brought to the bloom by her guardian. She stood before it trembling. But when the light touched her, she smiled for the first time in years. Later, she said she saw her mother waving from a field of golden grass, not as a lure, but as a memory honored, not stolen. The bloom was not taking it, was giving back. In Xalos, the temples that once rang with war chants now echoed with songs of healing. The Xanthari began planting gardens on their warships, turning weapons bays into greenhouses, and Earth-old military bases were turned into schools where children learned Xanthari language and history, not as enemies but as family. Lisa and the Queen traveled often between worlds, not as leaders, but as bridges. They visited refugee camps, orphanages, research outposts, always listening, always learning. One day on a quiet moon orbiting a gas giant, Lisa sat with the Queen under twin moons, much like those of Zalozdo. You ever miss the old ways? The Queen asked. Lisa thought about it. The old ways meant fear, meant walls, meant sleeping with one eye open. No, she said. I miss my brother every day, but I do not miss the world that took him. The world we are building now, it would have let him live. The Queen nodded. I miss the certainty of hatred. It was easier than the work of trust, but worth it. Always, as the moons rose higher, a message came through. Not an alarm, but a greeting from the bloom. It showed a new vision. Not of the past or future, but of now. Thousands of ships from dozens of species gathering around the light. Not just human and Xanthari, but others long silent in the dark, drawn by the change in the song of the galaxy. We are not alone, Lisa said softly. We never were. The Queen replied. They returned to the anchor station, to prepare not for war but for welcome. New species arrived, shy at first, speaking in clicks and hums and colors. But the humans and Xanthari greeted them with open hands and shared food and stories. The bloom had become a heart, and the galaxy its body, slowly healing. Years later, when Lisa's hair turned gray, and the Queen's silver eyes grew softer with age, they stood together on the highest deck of the anchor station, Now a city of light and learning. Below them children of all kinds played, in gardens that floated among the stars. A young girl with human eyes and Zenthari skin markings ran up to them, holding a small glowing stone. It sings. She said. Lisa smiled. That is because it remembers you. The queen knelt and touched the girl's cheek. You will teach it new songs. The girl nodded and ran off laughing. Lisa and the queen watched her go. We did good. The queen said, we are still doing it. Lisa replied, and in the quiet between stars there was no silence, only the gentle hum of a galaxy learning to breathe again. The galaxy had changed, but change is never the end. It is only the beginning, and Lisa knew this better than most. She watched from the observation deck of the anchor station as new ships arrived every week, not just from human or Zenthari worlds, but from places no one had known existed, small vessels with hulls like woven light or living bark. Their crews speaking in tones that danced like wind through leaves. The bloom at the galactic core had grown into a beacon, not of power, but of invitation. It pulsed gently now like a steady breath, and around it a new society formed. Not ruled by empires, but guided by memory and care. Lisa no longer wore armor. She wore simple clothes and walked the halls of the station, not as a soldier, but as a listener. She sat with elders from a dozen species, hearing stories of loss and hope. She played games with children who had never known war, and sometimes she just sat in silence watching the stars. The queen lived on the station now too. She had stepped down from the throne, not because she was weak, but because she believed leadership should be shared. She spent her days teaching young Zenthari how to read human faces and human children, how to understand the colors of Zenthari skin. One morning a distress call came, not from a war zone, but from a quiet system near the rim. The signal was weak, broken, but clear. It was from a ship called the Wanderer, a small science vessel crewed by 3 humans and 2 Zenthari. They had been studying an old ruin when something unexpected happened. The ruin had spoken not with the old signal, but with words in clear Zenthari and English. It said, we remember you, Lisa, and the queen took a shuttle at once. When they arrived, the crew of the Wanderer stood in awe around. The ruin, its surface no longer black, but shimmering with soft gold light symbols moved across it. Not as warnings, but as greetings. As Lisa stepped closer, the ruin projected an image not of destruction, but of a map. It showed dozens of other ruins across the galaxy, each one now glowing with the same gentle light. They are waking up. The queen whispered. Not waking, the captain of the Wanderer said, learning. Back on the anchor station, they gathered the council of many voices, a group formed of leaders. From every species that had answered the Bloom's call, they shared the map and agreed on a new mission. Not to guard or control the ruins, but to visit them, to speak to them, to remember. With them, Lisa led the first expedition. Her team included Dana, the engineer, Kale, the Zenthari researcher, and a young being from the outer veil named Nuri, whose people communicated through scent and light. They traveled to the nearest ruin on a world of red sand and twin moons. When they landed, the air was still. The ruin stood like a tall stone flower half buried in the dunes. Nuri approached, first releasing a soft golden mist from their body. A sign of peace, the ruin responded with a low hum and a warm glow. Then it showed them something no one expected, memory not of war or fear, but of the first builders, those who had made the ruins long before humans or Zenthari walked the stars. They were gentle beings who saw the universe as a garden. They built the ruins as seeds to help young species grow, not to test them, but to guide them. But something went wrong. A great silence fell, a plague of fear spread, and the gardeners vanished. Leaving the seeds to wait, now the seeds were blooming again. Lisa returned to the anchor station with tears in her eyes. We were never being hunted, she told the queen. We were being waited for. The queen held her hand tightly. Then we must not waste their wait over. The next year, expeditions went out to every marked ruin. Each one shared memories, each one offered wisdom. One ruin taught humans how to heal with sound. Another showed Zenthari how to grow food in dead soil. A third helped a newly arrived species reconnect with their lost history. The galaxy began to heal not through force, but through understanding, and Earth-old war memorials were replaced with gardens of remembrance, not for the dead alone, but for the lessons they left behind. Xalos. The great war halls became schools where children learned to speak in the tongues of 100 worlds. Lisa often Visited a quiet garden on the station where a small sapling grew. It had been planted from a seed found in the first ruin. It glowed faintly at night and hummed when touched. One evening the Queen joined her there. "Do you think they will come back?" she asked the gardeners. Lisa looked at the stars. "I think they are already here in every choice we make, to trust instead of fear, to listen instead of strike." The Queen smiled, her skin glowing a deep blue. "The color of peace. Then we are their legacy," as Lisa said in their Hopi as the years passed. Lisa grew older, her steps slower but her eyes still bright. She watched as the children she once taught became leaders themselves, guiding new species through their first contact not with weapons but with open hands. The Queen aged too. Her silver hair long now, her voice softer but still strong. She wrote books not of war strategy but of kindness. Across Starsown Day, a young human girl named May came to Lisa holding a data pad. "I want to go to the Outer Veil," she said. "They have a ruin there. No one has visited yet." Lisa looked at her, the same fire in her eyes that Lisa once had. "Who will go with you?" May smiled. "I asked Kale's granddaughter and Nuri's son." They said yes. Lisa nodded. "Good, you will need each other." That night Lisa sat with the Queen under the stars one last time. "I am tired," the Queen said. "I know," Lisa replied. They did not speak of death. They spoke of the journey, the trust, the quiet courage it took to remove armor, not just of metal, but of the heart. When the Queen passed a few weeks later, the whole station fell silent, not in grief but in honor. Every ship turned its lights toward Zalos. Every voice sang the old Zenthari song of return, not as a war chant, but as a lullaby. Lisa stood at the bow of the station watching the stars. She knew her time was coming too, but she was not afraid because the work would continue. In every child who chose kindness over fear, in every ship that flew not to conquer, but to connect, in every ruin that bloomed with memory, the galaxy was no longer silent. It was singing, and Lisa had helped write the first note. The fleet jumped into the galactic core. Not with fanfare but with silence. Even the engines seemed to hold their breath as they emerged into a region of space where stars flickered like dying candles. The signal was everywhere. Now not just in comms, but in the bones of the ships, in the pulse of every heart aboard. It whispered in 1,000 tongues, yet spoke one word. Homelisa stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, her hands steady on the console beside her. The Queen watched the view screen, her silver eyes narrowed, not in fear but in recognition. This place felt familiar, as if she had dreamed it 1,000 times. The ruins here were not scattered. They were woven together like roots of a vast tree. Black spires twisted through space, humming with that same cold energy the shard Lisa had brought pulsed in her pocket like a second heartbeat. Then the silence broke. Not with sound, but with absence. All comms cut out, all lights dimmed. Even the stars outside seemed to pull back, as if afraid to watch what came next. From the center of the spire field, a shape began to form, not solid, not empty, but something in between, a hole in reality that pulled at the mind like gravity. The entity was awake. Ships on the edge of the formation began to drift toward it, not under power, but as if drawn by longing. Their crews reported voices calling their names, promises of peace. An end to pain. Lisa saw it happen to a Zenthari cruiser first. Its engines shut down. Its crew went still. Then, the ship simply unraveled like smoke and wind. "We cannot fight it with weapons." The Queen said, her voice tight. "We must fight it with truth." Lisa understood. She opened a channel not to the fleet but to the entity itself, using the shard as a focus. She poured her memories into the signal, not just data but feeling the grief of losing her brother, the fear of facing the unknown, the hope she felt standing beside the Queen. She showed it what it could not understand: connection. For a moment, the pulling stopped. The entity hesitated on the view screen. The hole in space flickered like a confused eye. Then the Queen stepped forward and added her own memories, centuries of loneliness, of war, of watching her people harden into stone. She showed the moment. Lisa removed her helmet the moment she chose trust over fear. Together their memories formed a wall of light against the dark. The entity recoiled, but it was not defeated. It split from its form, burst thousands of smaller voids, each racing toward a ship. In the fleet, each carrying a personalized whisper, a perfect lie shaped to each soul. Lisa saw her brother appear on the view screen, alive and smiling. "Come home," he said. Her heart ached, but she knew it was false no. She said aloud, and in her mind, the queen faced a vision of her dead mother beckoning from a peaceful garden stay. She said, "You have suffered enough." But the queen turned away. "I choose to suffer. For those still living, one by one." The crews fought back, not with guns, but with truth. They spoke names of loved ones, they sang old songs, they held hands and remembered who they were. The voids shrank. But the central entity grew angry. Space itself began to tear. Lisa knew they could not hold it off forever. They needed to close the rift at its source. "I have to go in," she said. No, the queen grabbed her arm. "If you go in, you may not come back. Someone has to." The signal responds to memory to will. If I anchor myself in who I am, maybe I can seal it from inside. The queen searched her face, then nodded slowly. "Then I go with you?" They launched in a small shuttle, not armed, not shielded, just two beings and their shared resolve as they neared the rift. The whispers grew louder. Promises of rest, of reunion, of peace. Lisa held the queen's hand. "I am Lisa of Earth," she said aloud. "I am Vera of Zalos." The queen replied, "We are not yours." They crossed the threshold. Inside there was no space, no time, only echoes of every mind the entity had ever touched, a sea of lost souls crying for home. But Lisa focused on one memory, the queen's tears the day she removed her armor. Not as a warrior, but as a person offering trust. That memory became a light. The queen added her own. The moment she chose to believe a human over centuries of hate. Their light grew. The entity shrieked, not in sound, but in the sudden return of silence. It had stolen. Lisa reached into her pocket and pulled out the shard. She pressed it into the heart of the void. "Remember," she said, and the void remembered. It remembered what it had been before it became hungry, a guardian. A watcher left alone too long, forgotten by the civilizations it once protected in its loneliness. It began to call, and when no one came, it started to take. But now it was seen, truly seen. The rift began to close. Lisa and the queen felt themselves pulled back into their bodies, into their shuttle, into the real world. Behind them, the spires crumbled to dust. The signal faded to a whisper, then to nothing. The stars returned, on the bridge of the lead ship. Cheers erupted, but Lisa and the queen did not join them. They sat in the shuttle, breathing slowly, hands still clasped. "It is done," the queen said. "For now," Lisa replied. "But we must remember. So it never happens again." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy, changed human and Xanthari ships patrolled together. Not as allies of convenience, but as friends. They built a new station at the edge of the core, not for war, but for study and remembrance. They called it the Anchor. Lisa stayed aboard it, not as a soldier, but as a teacher. She taught human children about Xanthari history and Xanthari young ones about Earth's oceans and forests. The queen visited, often walking the halls, not in royal robes, but in simple clothes. She and Lisa would sit on the observation deck watching the stars. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they sat in silence. But it was a good silence. One evening, as the station turned toward a new sunrise, Lisa asked, "Do you think it is truly gone?" The queen looked at her, eyes soft. "Gave it what it needed, not fear, not war, but witness and care." "Maybe that is enough," Liza nodded. "Maybe." They knew the universe was vast and old and full of things they did not understand, but they also knew something new, something powerful. They were not alone, and as long as they remembered each other, they never would be. The end.